Autoline After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, your journey, our passion, and by Lear, a global leader in automotive seating and electrical systems.
This is Autoline After Hours with John McElroy and Gary Vasilash, episode 375 for April 28th of 2017. Automotive Sculpting or Bust. Watch Autoline After Hours live at Autoline.tv every Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. That's 12 p.m. Pacific. You can subscribe to this podcast for free by searching for Autoline in iTunes, Stitcher, or YouTube. And we're here with Autoline After Hours and Mr. Gary Vasilash.
John, how are you?
I'm doing terrific, actually. How
Great.
about you?
I'm doing really well, thank you.
Good.
Sounds like we're going to have a good show today.
I think we're going to have a great show, and we got to let everybody know Henry Payne's back with us again. It's good having you here.
Yeah, nice of you to have me.
Okay, and our special guest for today's show is Don Tocco. And Don, let's see if I've got this right. You're a poet, you're an athlete, you're a motivational speaker.
Trying.
You are also a sculptor, and you have sculpted some busts of people in the automotive industry, mainly at Ford, I believe, if I've got
That's
that right.
correct. That's correct.
So how do you do all this stuff?
Well, years ago I learned there were 24 hours in a day. Every hour of sleeping is potentially an hour wasted, so I tried to trim some of the sleep time away and said if we're going to get anything done, we've got to appropriate time for the things that are important. So it really is about planning and executing.
What got you into sculpting?
My mother indirectly, I was 21, was in a transitional period, as a lot of young folks are. No job, dropped out of school, made a few mistakes, and I had no money, and it was a Friday night. And I came home, and no one was home, and I couldn't go anywhere. And on the counter was a small piece of clay. And I thought, well, I have nothing to do, so I'll sculpt something. And so I tried to sculpt the German Shepherd. And after about 20 minutes, it was the ugliest thing you've ever seen. I mean, it was frightful. And I thought, well, animals are not going to be my thing. So I rolled it up into a ball and started to shape a bust. And after 3 hours, it turned out to be quite a likeness of perhaps a Buddha type of a person. Eyes closed because I didn't know how to do eyes. Bald because I didn't know how to do hair. Little tiny ears on it. But the shape was there. And I went to bed, and the next day, in the morning, my mother said, well, where'd that come from? And I said, I did that. She said, you didn't do that. Where did you get that? Don't lie to me. Where'd you get that? I said, that's the piece of clay that was on the kitchen counter. She said, that's pretty good. So when a mom tells you you've done something that's pretty good, that to me was a sign that maybe I can do more. And about 5 years later,
But Don, you must have had a artistic background before that. I mean,
No.
You didn't
No.
draw. You weren't like me when you were in grade school. Drawing during the lectures.
Mentioned I couldn't draw. Still can't draw.
Wow.
But God
talent.
blesses us in many ways, and it was a gift. My first piece was done with a butter knife, a spoon, a pencil, and a comb.
So John said that you do many sculpture pieces of people from Ford. How did you get involved with people in the auto industry?
Back in the late 80s, I mentioned earlier to John, we were talking about Mr. Lundy, the famed CFO.
Ed Lundy, just so everybody knows, was one of the whiz kids that was brought into Ford right after World War II by Henry Ford II.
That's correct.
Ed McNamara was one of them, and they were whiz kids.
Robert McNamara.
Robert McNamara.
Ed McNamara was the mayor of Livonia.
Yeah. Different guy.
Thanks for the correction, Gary.
That's right.
So anyway,
so
you met Ed Lundy?
They came in. We at the time had some partners. We had some property in Royal Oak, and we found a chef. His name was Keith Famey.
Yeah, we know Keith.
Yeah, of course.
Very, very
Keith
well known.
Made himself very popular, and at the time he was a fledgling chef. We tasted his food, very good, and my partners and I, we decided let's do whatever we can to get this young man in business. So we put him in Les Auteurs as the head chef and a partner, minority partnership, and people loved him. He could cook, he was personable, and we were off to the races. In fact, he became one of the top 10 new chefs in America in the second year. So one day, Keith said to me, have you met one of our partners, Ed Lundy? I said, no. He said, well, he's here tonight. You should meet him. And I said, no, what does he do? He said, well, he's the CFO of Ford Motor Company, just retired. I said, Keith, I said, we don't deal at that level. I said, nothing to talk about. He goes, no, you should meet him because he's a very interesting man. I said, well, introduce me. We met. We agreed to have lunch. 2 weeks later, we had lunch, a 3-hour lunch. I couldn't stop asking the gentleman questions. He seemed to like that. I like asking. He liked teaching. And that began a 20-year friendship. And in fact, I'm honored to say that when he passed 8-9 years ago, Gilmore and I did the eulogy, which was kind of interesting in itself, that you'd have the vice chairman and an unknown, really unknown person share that honor.
And when you say Gilmore, of course, Gilmore is the guy who also became CFO at Ford.
That is correct. That is Alan Gilmore. Right. That's right. Anyway, Ed and I formed a friendship, and after some years, I said to him, Ed, I said, you know, you've done so much for so many people. It would be a tremendous honor for us to have a likeness of you that we could pass along to the Automotive Hall of Fame or someplace. And I was sure, because he's a very humble man, a very sincere. If you read anything about him, it's all about quiet and humble. And I was sure he was going to say no. And I was shocked. He said, okay. So I'm thinking, wow, I'm going to do the whiz kid, one of the 10 smartest men in America, the god of industrial finance of the 20th century, who just stepped up away from German shepherds and little heads, right? So, so I just thought, this has got to be good. So I really put a great deal of time and energy into it. He was kind enough, I would go pick him up in Dearborn, drive him out to the studio, and we would work on it 2 or 3 hours on Saturdays. And then we get something to eat, because, as I said, he loved to eat.
Yeah, that requires a lot of patience. Yeah, for the subject.
Yeah, it really was. And it's hard to sit there. We would chat, of course, but eventually, because there's some sunlight, that sun would warm up my victims, and the next thing would be like this.
And
I go, what do I do? Do I say, do you break the man from his slumber, his afternoon nap? So we'd work around it, but everyone had the chance to nap. Poling napped regularly, too.
So Red Poling, another past CEO of
Yes.
Ford Motor Company,
Yep.
somebody else that you did a bust on.
Yes. Met Red in '93 when he was invited to receive the Albert Schweitzer Leadership Award in New York City with Ted Turner and Hillary Clinton. And I was involved as a volunteer for Hugh O'Brien Youth International. So I knew that Red could not know much about it other than it's a good program. And he knew Hugh O'Brien, the gunslinger, the marshal. So I called Ford. I said, Red Poling's office. Secretary answered. I said, Mr. Poling in? No, but, how can we help you? I said, well, Don Tocco, friend of Hugh O'Brien, and a volunteer for Hugh O'Brien Youth. Please let him know that I know he's going to be giving the acceptance speech in New York City. I'm guessing he doesn't know much about the organization enough to write an acceptance speech, and probably neither does anybody there. But I'll write it if he would like. So she said, oh, I'll tell him. So the next day I get a call back from the secretary. Mr. Poling thinks that'd be great. So I wrote the acceptance speech, sent it to them, went to the dinner in New York City. He was, I think Hillary Clinton was first, Ted Turner and Red was last. And I had my copy of the speech, of course, in my pocket. I'm looking at, and I'm listening. Well, sure enough, he used it, right? So after that, I contacted him about a month later, and I said, Red, really would enjoy meeting you personally, spending time. Would like to interview you so when I do these speeches for these young leaders, I can quote important people. And so he agreed to that, and we became friends and stayed friends till he passed away.
Okay, so now here's another tangent. What do you mean speaking to young people?
Well, I believe, one of the things I believe is there are 4 seasons of life. And that first season is imperative. It's our foundational season, which is a season of learning. So you gentlemen went to very fine schools, and you got that core data, that that block of information. Then we go to the fields to test that. What did we learn? Information is not knowledge. Information doesn't guarantee anything if we can't apply it. So, we would go from that to the application, and then if we're fortunate enough to succeed, then we mentor. And then after mentoring, we reflect. And so these friendships were about the mentoring stages, and I had, being with them, have listened to each of them reflect beautifully on their lives.
So you really believe in mentoring young people?
Mentoring is
leadership skills?
Yeah, probably more mentoring. Probably have spent as much time mentoring as actually working. But in mentoring, you can't charge. You have to give it away. So as soon as I learned enough to believe that I could do something in terms of motivating these youngsters, I started going to high schools back in the 70s and saying, guys, you're getting academics, but there's other principles that we have to use to succeed in life. You have to be enthused. You have to be excited. Passionate. I say passionate really is the word. And then you have to have objectives, personal objectives that keep us on track. You have to have enthusiasm and determination, focus, persistence, so that nothing stops that spirit from moving toward accomplishing its objectives. And faith in ourselves, strong faith in God, because we all falter many, many times. And then finally is the necessity to take courageous action.
Yeah. Well, and you have role models. I mean, I have one of my sons is a business grad and spent a lot of time in textbooks learning from individuals who've been successful. And you have so many around here. Obviously, you have a lot of associations with people like Pauling and Peterson here that you can point to of men who have inspired others.
That's exactly correct, and which was the core of my material at the presentation at Hillsdale College last Thursday. And we'll have that online for anybody that wants to see that. I think it's good for any young person, anyone, but any young person, to watch that, because after we talk about the 4 seasons of life, then I use my 4 mentors. I call them my 4 mentors, and talk about their learning history, where they went to college, they all excelled, how they applied themselves, the character of application, honesty, integrity, good people skills. And then every one of them became big-time mentors, and all reflected well.
Did you find a theme or a commonality among these leaders?
Yes.
And what is that?
Well, integrity, honesty, a faith in a higher power. They were driven to do the right thing, not by their own volition, but by something internal. Alan Mullally, I'm about 85% complete with his sculpture, and I said, Alan, why in the world would you want to take on? I mean, you knew Ford Motor Company was in grave danger of transitioning and maybe, who knows, following General Motors and Chrysler. And he said, I believed there was a possibility to be a part of something great. The phenomenal history of Ford Motor Company. And if I could make a contribution to help bring that back, imagine what that would mean to someone. And I said, but there's something, deeper than I said, Alan, what is it that drives you? And he stopped and thought a moment, and he said, to serve is to live. To serve is to live. And if you talk to him, you'll never hear him say I. I've never heard him say I. It's always, we, they, us, we did it. We, my team, the team. But never talks about, the personal pronoun. Never uses the word I. So that's a greater calling. I think it's a greater calling.
Yeah.
To service to mankind.
And that's common amongst these people.
Absolutely. Can't do enough for others. Always building other people up.
Now, have you had a long association with the Ford Motor Company through your own business? How are you getting to know the Mullalys and the Petersons so well?
Well, my business is Tocco and Associates is a small in terms of numbers of personnel, marketing company, but our specialty is bringing high-quality subcontractors to the attention of their buyers and engineers to build and maintain the plants. So we have worked in, I would surmise, probably every Ford plant in the country, and several in Mexico, Ford, Chrysler, General Motors. So that's how I'm adjacent to the industry itself, but never used in my career my relationships with the upper echelon in dealing with my customer. Buyers and engineers, we trust each other to do the right things. So it's ironic. You would think, oh well, you perhaps had a meeting and we're sharing with Red polling 30 years ago. Red, here's a better way to build an assembly plant. Here's a better way to install machine lines, presses. But that never happened. It was completely separate, and almost mystical, really. I mean, if you think about it, as I think about it, it's a blessing.
Yeah, just you've kind of compartmentalized
exactly
these enthusiasms of yours. You use the executives, the leaders. You use their subjects for your art and their subjects for your leadership programs. But your core business, you're dealing with people on the line and the engineers, and that's separate from your relationship with the executives. It's fascinating.
Completely.
Hey, we got to take a quick break right now. Don't go away, Don. We got more that we want to talk to you about, but we got to give a shout out to one of the great supporters of this program, our good friends at Bridgestone. Okay, we're back with Don Tocco. And what was it like meeting Mullally for the first time?
The first time I met Alan was at the Detroit golf course. Beautiful afternoon. It was a fundraiser for PAL. And I saw him.
The Police Athletic League.
Yes, exactly
just for those who don't know.
Yep.
Right.
And he was coming past the putting green area where I was missing everything. And so I happened to notice him. And I thought, well, I should go over and welcome him to Detroit. So I went over and I said, Mr. Mullally, welcome to Detroit. And I said, I want to wish you the very best of good fortune here. We need you. And I said, you've come to the right place. Especially being another redhead. and so he laughed, and I said, have you ever met Red Polling? And he said, I have not. I said, well, when you get settled, and if you'd like to meet Red, I can arrange that. That never happened. We did not have that meeting with Mr. Polling. But then, as time went on, and he began to work his magic, staying in the limelight in the right way. I said to Peterson one day, I said, hey, how well do you know Alan? Oh, he says, I was on his Boeing board. I said, well, you know him really, really well. So, oh, yeah. I said, did you have anything to do with him coming to Ford? He goes, no.
I asked him the same question.
I bet you
because
did.
I wondered. I knew that Peterson had been on the Boeing board, and I figured that's how the connection had come about. And I got a chance to ask him it, and he said, nope, I had nothing to do with it.
I know. I was shocked.
Same here.
He was 15 years he was on his board.
Yeah.
So I said, Don, told Peterson, I said, we have this dinner every year. This will be our 16th annual. We call it the Boys Only Dinner. And it started with Ed Lundy, who loved a good meal. We all like to eat, but he was really big on a great meal. So I said, we'll get a good chef, Keith Famey, our old chef, and we'll have a dinner at my house. Because if I cooked, it'd be a bowl of cereal and some milk and some. So I wasn't
good male meal.
Yeah, that's right. So Ed said, no, that's great. So he brought that first dinner. We had Ed, Stan Seneker, who was the then CFO. I don't know if you remember Stan.
I don't.
Joe Antonini joined us.
He was what, Kmart?
Ex-Kmart chair.
Yeah.
Ed was on the Kmart board, so they knew each other. So that was the first boys-only dinner. Then each year we'd add, not every year, but every 2 or 3 years, we'd add someone. We brought Dr. Arnn one year from Hillsdale College. Keith Priddy from Northwood University has joined us. So then Peterson joined us. Poling. It was then Poling, then Peterson, and about 5 years ago, 4 years ago, we got Alan to come to dinner, and
Those must have been fascinating discussions.
yeah, you can't believe it. You can't believe it. These 6, 7, 8 guys, and I'd really like to be the fly on the wall, you know, and just listening to the answers of great questions, and
All off the record, I assume.
you know what?
As we journalists like to
You know
say.
something, you know something? I would sit there in awe of some of the answers that I heard. And Lundy was very, very open. Lundy was always Lundy was active at Ford unofficially until probably, he died at 92. I would say he was active unofficially until he was 87 or 88. So when we would have our lunches, I would ask him, Ed, what do you think of, well, you have a new CEO, you have Jack Nasser. What do you think? I'm not going to give you his response, but he would give me candid, quick, he was very quick, and always turned out to be almost prophetic, responses and insights. So all the fellas would give answers and would talk about things that in no way could I ever talk about in public.
So what percentage of the discussion was about the auto industry and what percentage was about other enthusiasms?
That's a great question. That's a great question. I would say that 70 to 80% was about the industry, and then about the country, and other considerations that and occasionally a really good joke that I have to throw in there. But yeah, it was incredibly insightful, and I regret. Hugh O'Brien told me many years ago when we met. He said after a couple of years, he said, "Do you journal?" Because I was telling him some stories. He's like, "That's pretty." I said, "No." He said, "You should start to journal." And I would say to anybody, the shortest pencil is longer than the longest memory. And I really wish I had journaled, because even earlier when we were chatting, John, about different things, I had to without speaking, you want to say the right thing. You want to say what is as close to the truth as possible, not just the way you remember the truth, because that can be, it could be 10 degrees off. But to have written some of those finite details would have been, in fact, that we would have been getting together for me to write a book. You'd have said, "Hey,
Yeah.
Tocco, here's how you do it."
Yeah, that'd be a great journal. I mean, in the political world, which I dabble in, every presidential campaign, there's a journalist will get permission to follow the candidates, and the agreement is they'll get inside. They'll get absolute inside access to everything the candidate sees, with the agreement that they won't publish it until after the campaign. And if your journal of these discussions would be, sort of a great
a book for later.
Yeah, post-mortem of some
Yes.
sort, to say, here's the
Here's the way it really was.
right. Here's the acquired wisdom of these
I'm
gentlemen.
going to start journaling.
Yeah. I wonder who told the best joke in that group? Who's the best joke teller?
Me.
I
Sorry.
believe that too.
I like this. You were talking earlier about before we came on about Mullally's smile, and
Yes.
as a sculptor, the difficulty of teeth.
Yes.
Talk about that a little bit.
Well, it's rare that you'll see a bust with teeth. Part of the reason is a lot of times folks don't have teeth that you'd want to replicate. It's one of the things. The other thing is the idea of doing a sculpture with a smile and showing teeth is kind of remarkable, because nobody smiles most of the time, except Alan Mullally. I mean, if you ever seen Alan, I mean, he just, when he received the induction to the Automotive Hall of Fame last July, he walked in at 5:30. And from 5:30 till he was done with, we were done with dinner, he never stopped smiling. I said, how can anybody smile that much? I mean, you start to fall, the things start to crack. So when I said, okay, we're going to do this, but Alan, no teeth. I don't do teeth. And he goes, why not? I said, because they're brown.
Yeah, they're bronze.
You bronze them, they're brown, and I don't think they look good. And I could tell he was disappointed. So I said, okay, since I've never done teeth, I don't even know if I can do them one for one.
Got to be a first time, just like that Buddha head.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So I said, okay, I'll try. And so, we had the countenance, and there was the smile, and so then I, moved the lips up and down, and put some clay in there, and started to shape teeth, and they actually look. I think they look pretty good. So when it's cast, he will be smiling forever.
How long does it take to do a bust? Start to finish.
Start to finish.
I don't even mean with the clay. You said you can't draw. How do you start? Do you do sketches at all? Or?
Oh, I just start to build out the infrastructure of the general shape of the face, the head, and the shoulders. Mm-hmm. I take pictures, put them on a easel, and look at all angles. So it's a virtual 360-degree perspective. So you're picking up the various nuances and shapes and I also take pictures of the back. And when I did Alan, I flew out to, because he has home in Scottsdale. We had lunch, played golf, and we came off the golf course. I said, Alan, I'd like to take the pictures now, which is kind of embarrassing in a way, because here's a CEO, and he's got all his buddies from this country club, and he goes, well, where? I said, well, right there against that wall. He's like, really? Okay. So I said, now you have to start to turn. So, as he's turning, I'm taking, and now he's facing the wall, and I'm taking the pictures of the back of his head. And he says, are you really taking pictures of the back of my head? I said, yeah, because, Alan, your sculpture, people will walk around it. And when you look, if you see the back of his cranium, you'll see that the head is normally shaped, but his right ear turns out just a little bit farther than the left ear. And if you see it, you will say to yourself, Tocco screwed up. Because, that can't be. But no, it's, if you saw him, you'll see that it's, so I do it the way I see it.
Yeah.
So how long does it take?
It'll take 30 to 40 hours.
Yeah. No, in political caricature, which I do, and you can get so much from a 2D picture, but ultimately you have to look at video. In my case, of a person to really see how the person moves, and to see the face in 360-degree dimension, and it's got to be even more important for you as a sculptor. But the great sculptor in the caricature world was Honoré Daumier from the 19th century, the wonderful French caricaturist.
Oh yeah.
And a lot of guys in my business would love to do sculpture, but we're all deadline guys. I mean, we're working on 24-hour deadlines, and the idea of spending 30 to 4 hours on sculpture is
it's
just
a luxury.
Yeah.
And it can take a year. I've spent as much as a year on a piece. I use a product called Plastilina, which is a plastic clay with oil, and you stop and you cover it and come back 30 days later, and it's exactly the same. It does not. There's no shrinkage.
Yeah. Now, are these busts all in the Automotive Hall of?
Those Lundy, Poling, Peterson are in the hall, and with the plan to present Mullally at some point to the group over there.
Are they're all one-offs? Do you do copies?
No, I do. I keep a copy. If you come to my home, my studio, it's a room of the Walking Dead. I mean, there's 12, 14 executives, 12, and my grandmother, and my mother. So there's it's not all highly successful leadership folks. But when you walk in, I have them in groups like Poling is by the French door, and Peterson is in the middle. They're kind of looking toward each other, and Lundy is. So I have the three of them as because they were all good friends. And Lundy mentored both Bowling and Peterson. Don said many times, he said, you didn't get the approval of Ed Lundy, you didn't go anywhere at Ford. Ed had to believe in you. So they're kind of, and I've got over on the right Brooks Patterson with Joe Antonini and Ralph Nichols. Do you know Ralph Nichols by chance?
I don't think so.
Was the quintessential, the sponsor of the Dale Carnegie Leadership Course, the biggest franchise in the world at one time. So they're over there because they're all high energy guys. They're probably, they're probably talking when I'm sleeping. I don't know, but it's an interesting feeling when you walk. It's quite a large room, and it's very regal and
Sounds like a museum.
it's like a museum. It's a very thoughtful place. It's a very thoughtful place.
So have you talked to the current generation of Ford executives about doing them?
Well, I've actually we have one of the top leaders in the company who some of us think will eventually be at the top or near the top, who will be joining us in October for our boys only dinner. I can't tell you who that is. I would be. I can't tell you that.
That's okay.
But
That's okay.
yeah, we're communicating. I've had a chance to meet Mark. Spoke to Mark. I think he's doing a great. He's a great communicator.
Yeah. And you really got to, if you do his sculpture, you really got to take pictures of the back of his head. So he's got the best mullet in the industry.
He does have an enviable head of hair. He really does. But he is, we've all watched him, from day one. In fact, when I didn't meet him until the dinner, the Hall of Fame dinner, and I introduced myself and I said, I just want to give you a compliment. I think you do a great job in your interviews with the press. He's lucid. He's got a great command of his material. He knows what's important to talk about. He doesn't get derailed. I've seen people try to derail him, and he's got a smile. And he said, when I complimented him, he said, "Really?" I said, because we're all, we all think we can do better. And I said, "Yeah, really. I think you're doing a really great job." He says, "I'm really working hard on it." I said, "Well, to me, it looks like you're really succeeding." And so yeah, I think it's a great challenge. I think he's doing a great job. He's got more to deal with today. With the autonomous vehicle and the safety and it's just a big job.
Well, I was interested too, Don, from your perspective. I mean, you've been dealing with plants. I mean, plants are all of us take every opportunity we can to get into plants. They're amazing things, the assembly line process. You've been dealing with plants and the people who build them for decades. What's changed to you in your business, and what's different today than it was 40 years ago?
There are, the equipment is the equipment. The labor force is the labor force. The cooperation that I think that Don Peterson inspired, and Alan, getting the unions to buy in. To commit to excellence, because Ford and certainly I think the big three are building better cars than they have ever built in the last 5, 6, 7 years. But Ford put a tremendous amount of effort in quality in the partnering and challenging the labor force to build a great vehicle, and they have stepped up to that challenge. But the big difference is the type of equipment, the technology is incredible. What the machines can do. I think Smith was hoping back in the early '80s that the equipment, the technology was adequate, that he could use more of it then, but it wasn't ready. That's why Roger failed. Is they weren't ready to be as automated as he had anticipated. But the actual buildings themselves everything's the same. Delivery system is different. It used to be design criteria. Albert Kahn, you're familiar with Albert Kahn? One of the great architectural firms in the world of industrial plants. Always over-engineered things to last forever. You could never tear an Albert Kahn plant down. I mean, the thing was built like a fortress. So it's much different. It's much lighter. It's built for the environment. So plants in the South have no roof system for a load of snow. You know, they used to, the plants were just built. They all build them all in case it snows in Texas. You know, but the delivery system was general construction subcontractors, and the owner controlled it because the owner had the talent, had the engineers, and had the project managers, so they could really oversaw the plants, the full project. But because of they pulled back in that labor sector, in the with engineers, they have less qualified people, so now they have to lean more heavily on the major builders, like Walbridge Aldinger, commercial contracting, Barton Mallow, and they're giving them, instead of parsing out portions, they're giving them whole programs, $500 million blocks of capital to build out the entire systems. So that's one big change. Mm-hmm. But we still found a way to service that too.
Yeah.
They try to get rid of me, but I'm figure out how to hang in there.
Good for you.
Don, I'm afraid we're going to have to wrap up this segment of the show.
What an honor.
It's been a pleasure having you here.
Thank you.
Really
Pleasure.
interesting.
Thank you.
Very different from our other guests, but it's been terrific having you here today.
I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Real honor, fellas.
You bet.
Don.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break here now. We're going to show you one of these 37-second car reviews that we've been doing, and we'll be back to talk about more of what's going on in the automotive industry.
This is 37 seconds in the Autoline garage.
A vehicle has to earn the trail rated badge by passing off-road tests, so it's no surprise to find it on the front fender of the 2017 Grand Cherokee Trailhawk, the 6th trim level of this FCA Superstar brand. It's easy to spot this Jeep anywhere with its signature red tow hooks as it forges a path in the wild or just swings around the concrete jungle. Plus, there's a Uconnect app that monitors both the Trailhawk's standard four-wheel drive Jeep setup as well as this vehicle's special air suspension system. So if you're looking for an SUV with the off-road credentials of a Jeep plus an affordable taste of luxury, then you just may want to land a Trailhawk.
This has been 37 seconds in the Autoline garage.
Okay, we're back. Interesting discussion.
Yeah.
Very.
I think we should point out, Henry was mentioning this, and I don't know that everybody realizes this, that not only are you the auto critic for the Detroit News, but you're also the editorial cartoonist.
Right.
And you are syndicated.
That's right.
So you wear two hats over there.
That's right.
Maybe more, but...
Yeah, I'm on the editorial page and the in the auto pages. Mm-hmm. So I'm drawing Trump and Ryan and Hillary Clinton and all these characters at the same time I'm out there driving cars. Right. So yeah, it's fun to talk to somebody like Don Tocco, who's got his mitts in different fields, and it's fun for me to sort of have. Keeps life fresh when you can put on a different hat and immerse yourself in a different subject.
Right.
Okay, so it's that part of the show where it's time to bring in the Dr. Data number.
All right. So now this one we're gonna do it a little different this time. This is gonna be a quiz, and this is obvious. Okay, you're gonna get the things in advance, so you just have to figure things out. So Carmen, please bring up the first slide. All right, so global automotive software market share 2016. Okay, so we see chassis, powertrain, infotainment, and safety systems. Now, what I want you guys to do is to rank these. Okay, so they're
How much software is in each one?
well, no.
Right.
So okay, in the market, what is number 1? What is number 2? What is number 3? And what is number 4? Okay,
In terms of what?
market share.
In terms of software.
Correct. So software for chassis, software for powertrain, software for infotainment, software for chassis.
And when you're saying software, what do you mean, like how many lines of code?
No. I mean, in terms of how much spend goes on for
spending.
Right.
Software spend, software specific.
Yeah. So in
each of
these, so what market share do they hold based on spending? So okay. Who wants to go first? So they're not in order. I mean, they're mixed up there.
So I'm going to say powertrain.
Is number 1, you think?
That's what I think.
Okay. How about you, Henry?
You want 1, 2, 3, 4? Just we start with
If
1.
you want to go,
Yeah, I'm going to go powertrain 1, safety 2, infotainment 3, chassis 4.
Okay, I'm going to say powertrain, infotainment, safety, chassis.
well, you guys are both sort of right. So, Carmen, bring up the answer. So there you have it.
Safety,
number one.
Wow, interesting.
So this is from a research firm, Navio, and so safety systems.
Just so for the podcast people, safety number one, infotainment number two,
Right.
powertrain, which was my first choice, number three, and chassis last.
So it's a pretty big delta because, I mean, you look at safety systems, basically 29% of the market is there. And when I first, I mean, I thought it would be infotainment. I thought it'd be no question about that because, I mean, that seems to encompass,
Right.
much of what's being developed now. But safety systems, and so I guess the way we need to look at this is that as we're doing development in terms of autonomous things. So, all right, now we're going to do another one. Okay.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
I'll test Dr. Data's history, but presumably safety systems may not have even shown up on that list 15 years ago. I mean, this concept of
Software wouldn't have shown up on that list 15 years ago.
even in infotainment.
Yeah. Well, maybe.
That's a joke, Henry.
Yeah. Maybe a bit longer than 15, but
Right.
yeah.
All right. So you guys get another shot at this. Okay. So bring up number 3 slide. Okay. So now we want to look at the compound annual growth rate between 2016 and 21 for the 4 categories. So basically, what you can do it again is rate which will have the greatest levels of growth. Okay, in terms of compound annual growth rate. Okay. So this doesn't mean necessarily what will be the biggest, but it means what will grow the most.
Oh, see, this
Okay,
is
and
okay.
this is much tougher than the first one, and I'll tell you, they're all very close.
In this case, it's in terms of dollar spend.
In terms of yeah, so what will their growth be within, so we looked at that earlier thing, and now what was going to be the growth rate?
So my question would be, if we look through 2021, which is where this goes up to, you're going to see autonomous systems coming in, level 4. Where would that get classified? Would it be safety? Would it be chassis? Where? Because I think that's going to be the major driver of growth.
All right, so I should point out, and I'm just seeing that, so for purposes of getting it all on the screen here, that infotainment also includes telematics, and it did for the first one.
Okay, then I go with infotainment.
That didn't help you guys out anyway, so I'm just
It didn't.
I'm just saying. All right, so you think the number one will be the greatest growth will be in infotainment.
Right.
That'll be number one. Henry, what do you think will be number one? We'll just do it the number one.
Boy, but powertrain investments are just massive. I mean, I'll go infotainment 1, powertrain 2, safety 3, and chassis 4.
That's great, Henry. You're 100% wrong.
No, that's
All right, so
very tricky.
bring up the answer.
Chassis?
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting. Well, chassis would probably get involved with, so much of this autonomous stuff.
Yeah.
So steering
New
and
platforms, putting batteries in the floor. I mean, you see. I mean, see companies just making whole new chassis in order to accommodate
and the thing of is, I mean, to be fair to you guys though, so basically, if we were to go back, and we're not going to do this because it's getting rather tedious already. If we were to go back to the first one, that chassis was number 4. Okay, so basically it was at the bottom. So there's going to be more growth in that area as a result of that, and so that's what that represents. But I just thought it was rather interesting. Again, my immediate gut reaction was, oh no, it's going to be all in terms of sensors and things like that they're going to do more software for. But that wasn't the case at all. But so there you go. That was our quiz for the week.
All right.
That's good. And that's just within the next 5 years or 4 years.
Yeah.
2021.
So, and it sort of brings, up a point that, so this week, Waymo and Fiat Chrysler announced that there will be 500 more hybrid Pacificas going into the Waymo autonomous development fleet. And I started thinking about that, and it's just like, okay, minivans by and large have become a decreased,
Shrinking segment.
Yes, shrinking segment. People have less interest in them than they did before. And so I'm thinking, is it possible that autonomy will actually make minivans more popular?
More than possible. I think you're onto something there.
Yeah.
Because if you're getting into an autonomous car, You want to have all this room inside to do whatever the hell you want. And probably you'll even want, I believe, interiors that are customized to your own personal taste. Maybe even reconfigurable. In fact, I'm wondering if somebody shouldn't work with California Closets to figure out how to organize the interior of a car better. But yeah, and if you're going to have all this reconfigurability and do different things, a minivan's a bigger package.
Right.
It's the most efficient package.
Right. Well, and I think the future of autonomy is not individual cars; it's fleets, and that's where we're going to see autonomous. And so, yeah, configurable space is going to be a big deal if you're a fleet customer and you've got to satisfy a lot of different clients. So I mean, and no accident at this year's Detroit Auto Show, you had Chrysler showing essentially a minivan autonomous concept. Nissan's concept was also very configurable inside. Wasn't a minivan, but it had a big interior, Lucid motors. It was all about the big back seat in their
But it's a big sedan, though.
Right. So that kind of goes more to individual autonomy.
But, so here's a question for you guys. Okay, we have seen, whether we're looking at sales numbers and trends in this whole area, that the whole phenomenon of crossovers and SUVs becoming more popular at the expense of sedans and certainly of minivans. But if we go back to this 2021 thing that we're just looking at in terms of the number, is there the possibility that we're actually going to see a faster rise in terms of interest in minivans because of autonomy, and perhaps a slowing of the growth of crossovers in SUVs? Because I mean, those things aren't the best things for space efficiency or the interior of a crossover compared to a minivan, certainly.
Well, I'll throw this in too. I mean, you look at hatchbacks, which are not a big percentage of the U.S. market right now. I think those are going to grow because the other, sort of in parallel to autonomous, I think ride sharing is a huge revolution. And I wrote a piece this week about the Hyundai Ioniq. In my opinion, being a good competitor to the Toyota Prius, not because it's a green car, but because it's a very efficient car for ride-sharing services. You look at ride-sharing numbers, and increasingly hybrids, small hybrids, are a bigger and bigger share of that market. The Prius is the biggest ride-share vehicle in London, for example, and you see that over here. So that's a hatchback space. It's affordable for the operator to use, but it's also easy to put customers in the back. So I think that's going to. Ride sharing is going to work well for customers, and it should work well for autonomous as well.
Well, Ford's using transit vans, or is it Transit Connect with its Chariot ride-sharing service in San Francisco?
Yeah, it's the bigger transit, not the smaller one.
I mean, yeah, is it going to be minivans or is it just going to be vans? I mean, maybe we're splitting hairs talking about that kind of a distinction.
But it won't be a fusion.
No, correct. Exactly right.
Right. I mean, and so when we see the pictures of what Ford is doing, it's a fusion. When we look at General Motors is doing, it's a Bolt. Well, that gets to your hatchback sort of thing. Yep. So I mean, there is that. But I mean, so by and large, I mean, it's almost as though that Waymo, and I'm sure that John Krafjack, who used to be with Honda, by the way, when he was looking around of, okay, who do we partner with in terms of getting a vehicle, that perhaps he said, minivan may be the way to go with these things.
And also, we need a partner who's not putting any research into this autonomous stuff, too, and who needs us desperately.
And then plus part of the thing has to be that, just in terms of this initial stuff, I'm sure that there's like large boxes full of processors and things. And so at this point, you're taking advantage of the space inside just
for development.
Right.
But again, I keep pointing out, if you look at Delphi's autonomous vehicle, and you open up the back of that Audi, what is it, Q5 that they're using, you don't see anything.
Right.
I mean, so they've already, got it where it fits under the space where the spare tire would be. It's out of the way.
Yeah. So, and also this week, so Waymo started offering rides to people in the Phoenix area. Yeah.
Free rides.
Yeah.
All day long. Once you get accepted in the program, you can use it. In fact, they encourage you to use it as often as you can.
So what do you think, Henry? Public roads, here's this thing riding around with regular people in it?
Yeah, I've been wanting to get to Pittsburgh and see how that experiment works with Uber and their self-driving cars. So it'd be interesting to see how Waymo is putting it together. Have they announced the vehicles that are in Phoenix? Are they minivans?
They're both Chrysler Pacificas and Lexus RXs.
Yeah.
RX 450s.
Yeah, and are they designated routes? How are they
No.
working with the Phoenix
You
local?
apply, you have to be 18 years old or older. If you're accepted to be in the program, anybody in your family can use it. And they encourage you to use it as often as possible for whatever you want. There will be a driver in there.
Right.
I mean, even though these are autonomous vehicles, they're not taking any risks at all.
Yeah, they're calling it a safety driver.
It's one driver. You have two in the case of Uber in Pittsburgh, right? Don't those have two drivers?
I didn't think.
Why?
They're one.
Really?
Well, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, as we discuss on this thing, I mean, where's the tipping point with the regulators where they let these cars go alone? And at that point, I think it becomes more restrictive. Once you take the drivers out, then I think the regulators will start with demanding designated lanes and that sort of thing.
I don't think so, but hold on. Let's come back to this because we got to take another quick break right now. We're going to give a shout out to our friends at Lear.
Lear Connexus offers a parental controls application with geofencing that sends notifications regarding driving behavior and location, including curfew alerts, acceleration alerts, and speed alerts. All delivered to a smartphone application that includes vehicle location, driver notifications, and a report card of driving history, including notifications when predefined geographic boundaries are crossed. For more information, visit Lear.com.
Boy, and that ad ties into what we're talking about here. But yeah, you're thinking that regulators are going to say, okay, now they can only be in designated lanes.
Once you take the drivers out.
I don't think that's going to happen only because the Tesla data and the Google data both suggest that when these cars are in autonomous mode, they're far safer than with a human being driving them.
But you got to convince the regulators of that.
Yeah, well, how else do you convince them? I hope with just data.
Yeah.
So according to Waymo, self-driving vehicles have the potential to prevent many of the 1.2 million deaths that occur each year on roads worldwide, 94% of which are caused by human error.
Right.
Okay, so that's one data point for them. They go on to say, we refine Waymo technology through 1 billion miles of simulation testing each year. Our cars have self-driven nearly 3 million miles on public roads in 4 U.S. cities. So these guys are accumulating data like mad, and they're going to show that.
But there's still the human element. I mean, these things are getting rear-ended all the time.
Well, there's been a few incidents.
Yeah,
I wouldn't say all the time.
Well, yeah, right. I'm exaggerating,
right.
but they have a higher rate than the average vehicle in terms of getting their rear-end accidents are a higher rate than the average vehicle. I think I talked to my motorhead friends about this too out in California, who are getting familiar with the idea of autonomous vehicles, and they like to play with them when they see them.
Oh, I mean, like
force them to stop,
cut them off,
Yeah.
these sort of things. I mean, it's a very complicated environment, and it'll be interesting to see how they get along. That's why I say I think the regulators are going to be a little nervous about just letting them loose on every
There's no
street.
question, they already are.
Right.
But I think long run, let this play out in another 3-4 decades, they're going to ban people from driving because the autonomous cars are just so much safer.
Well, I'd like to be a fly on the wall in city planning meetings. In this town, when the Kresges and the Roger Penske's walk in with M1 Concourse, I mean, I think it'd be a brilliant test program here. Now that you have the M1 rail, not Concourse.
It's like
Concourse
a trolley
is a racetrack,
system in
right?
Detroit.
Which is running up and down Woodward
Avenue.
This is not a dense city in terms of traffic, and it would be a wonderful test bed to start running autonomous nodes off of M1 into the neighborhoods. And in this town, it would deal with a lot of issues. Safety, because that is public safety is a big issue, and whether whether autonomous cars can be safe if they're unmanned, and and also if they can deliver people directly to the points they want to go
in fact,
to.
this is one thing that I know the city of Detroit is grappling with, and other cities too. Should we be investing hundreds of millions of dollars in new buses or subways or whatever it happens to be, when maybe these autonomous systems are right around the corner and are going to obsolete it? And so you can have buses and trains and subways, but I think and what you're getting at here too is, how do you address the last mile?
Yep.
So I got off the last bus stop, but now my house is still blocks and blocks and blocks away. It'd be great to have a little autonomous car that comes and picks me up and takes me right to my front door.
Absolutely.
You know, we've talked on the show, one of the concerns that you have expressed, John, in terms of autonomous vehicles is the ability to speed, whether the robot controller will allow you to do that or not. And so in the UK this week, there was a new regimen of fines for people who get caught speeding. And I mean, this is some serious money, okay? It used to be that the maximum fine was £1,000 that you could get for, now it's up to 2,500 pounds for speeding, okay?
Wow, which is what,
and
$3,000 or more than that?
More than that. And so basically, this law went into effect after April 24th, and offenders can be charged up to 175% of their weekly income if they're caught speeding, but there's still the cap of 2,500 pounds, so they can't do that more than that. So in light of that, Ford, and I thought this was very interesting technology that they have, is that they have a system called the intelligent speed limiter. And the intelligent speed limiter actually will, read signs and what the speed limit signs are, and adjust things accordingly. But it does have the capability. The intelligent speed limiter allows drivers to set a speed tolerance of up to 5 miles an hour above the detected speed limit. So there you go.
Yeah.
So the robot will give you five miles an hour.
Well, I hope my robot will do better than that.
Well, but here's the thing. So if you're in London, right, they're basically, or in the UK, that if you're from 1 to 10 miles an hour above the speed limit, your fine can be 25 to 75% of your weekly wage. So
yeah, well,
5 miles an hour, boy.
I'm not going to drive in England.
Those Brits are no fun. Well, and it'll be interesting to watch Jeremy Clarkson. I like reading his columns, and he gets a McLaren loaner for the week and winds around, driving around London in speed limits.
I think he can afford it.
He can afford it.
No, but he can't use the capability of the car.
Right.
I mean, he just talks about the frustration of living in a camera environment where you can't go over the speed limit or you're fined because the cameras are taking pictures of you all the time. I think that there's the other end of that in Michigan, glorious Michigan. I love this state. Just approved 75 mile an hour speed limit for a lot of the rural interstates. 600 miles of rural interstate in this state. One of the glories of autonomous, we're told when they come, is that they can travel very closely together at high speeds. So
like drafting in NASCAR.
That's right. So maybe we go the other direction as more autonomy comes in.
The faster we're going to go.
Yeah, you'll get again. I wonder if you'll start with autonomous lanes, but you'll have autonomous lanes where these cars will be allowed to go even faster than 75 miles an hour.
Those of us who have been preaching autonomy for several decades now want the speed limit raised to 150 miles an hour. And Honda's goal, Honda's vision is 300 kilometers an hour, which is 180 miles an hour.
Yeah, because they're high-speed trains.
With no back off on emissions, efficiency, or safety. That's the caveat. We're not going to take a step back to go that much faster. But we're going to have the technology to double the speed limit.
All right, but we may not even need to worry about any of that stuff because we also saw this week a lot of interest in flying cars. You mentioned Uber. Uber announced that they're going to begin developing this thing. They're going to test bed it in the United States, Dallas, and even in Dubai. So, what's your take on that?
My take on that, I mean, I'm old enough that every decade has its flying car entrepreneur. And my take is, and this is wonderful, but Silicon Valley is taking a fresh look at everything because they're discovering the automotive space. And so I think they're looking at...
Here we got a video running too as we speak. But
just like, I mean, in this town, the entrepreneurs have been looking at flying cars as long as I can remember. And I think Silicon Valley, is now with fresh eyes looking on the flying car. You even have Sergey Brin building a blimp.
Right.
At the
That's what he's
NASA.
rumored to be building.
No, I've been by that hangar. He's building a blimp in the NASA
Ames.
NASA facility right off of Route 101. You know, it's new toys for a new generation of car builders.
Embraer Bell Helicopter, okay, the venerable Bell Helicopter, and Aurora Flight Sciences have signed on for large-scale manufacturing of vertical takeoff and landing aircraft. So it's just not.
But they're not flying cars in the sense. I mean, we're talking drones. Mm-hmm. And, you know, drones are what? They're helicopters with a different name, essentially. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I can see that in high-density, high-traffic areas, these things are going to work instantly. You know, when you listen to people talking about some of these third-world countries where it's a 4-hour drive to the airport, you know, you could probably ride your bicycle there in 45 minutes, but it's to drive because of the traffic. It's just horrific. Yeah. These things will work like crazy. It'll go over like $1 million.
And ChargePoint, which Nissan announced
more than $1 million though.
Last week, ChargePoint announced with Nissan that they're going to build a electric charging corridor down from Boston to Washington, D.C. And ChargePoint now is saying, you know what, we're going to charge those aircraft. So they're going to build charging stations.
Well, you know, I'm not so confident that I'm going to go up in a battery-powered flying vehicle because I'm not sure the battery. They'll have to convince me of that. But yeah, I think we got to do a whole show on.
Well, the guys from Michael Sivak and Brandon Shotley of the Umtree, who always are doing research on automotive stuff, they did research on automotive cars. And according to
you mean flying cars?
Flying cars. And most of the respondents want a flying car to plug in to refuel. So people want, unlike you.
Well, you know, I read a great quote, and I don't know if it was one of those two guys. He said, I love the idea of having my own drone where I can fly wherever I want to. I hate the idea of my neighbor having one because these things are bloody loud. You know, you don't want this thing, you know, flying over your backyard, making all this racket. Mm-hmm. There goes your privacy in your backyard, and there are a lot of issues to overcome.
I just wonder about the congestion. I mean, all these things flying around. I thought autonomous cars, I think, will work much better because they're.
Yeah, we're not even at autonomous cars yet.
It's 2D, not 3D.
Right. No, it's, I mean, like I say, I can remember the flying car discussion for as long as I've been alive. I mean, you know, one of my favorite cartoons as a kid was the Jetsons, yeah. And we're no closer to it today than we were 40 years ago, so.
No, I think we're closer. But when we say flying cars, be careful because, you know, people think of you're driving a car and all of a sudden the wings, you know, unfold and boom, you take off. But all the flying cars that have been built are terrible flying vehicles and terrible cars. Yeah. They're a horrific compromise to try to get both. So now if you just stick to saying, you go to the spot, you park, you get in the drone takes you to the airport or wherever past all the bumper-to-bumper traffic, I could see that working. But having a vehicle that does both drive down the road and fly, I don't think so.
Complicated and expensive.
Sort of like those cars that turn into boats.
Right. Yeah, the old James Bond Lotus, what is it? Yeah.
The Aspa car.
Yeah. How expensive is that thing to engineer? Yeah. That's right. But I don't know what's on your all's menu for the show, but for all this heady stuff, Gary and I were in Louisville this week, basically at the relaunch of the Acura brand, which, you know, it gets, I mean, you know, back on the road to what's possible right now, and I find that fascinating. What's going on in the luxury space right now? That you have an Acura trying to reinvent itself at the same time you have Genesis and Alpha coming in as entirely new brands. You have Lincoln trying to reinvent itself. I mean, do you think it matters, or do you think BMW and Mercedes will rule forever?
I think it matters to Acura, Genesis, and Alpha. I mean, I'm sure that they're going to be able to get people to buy their products, you know, perhaps not in the massive numbers that we see for Mercedes and BMW, but you know, you might make the argument. I mean, Lexus managed to get its foot in the door and
Right.
get in the room with the rest of those big boys. And so, as we're seeing transaction prices for cars keep going up, 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 up. So quite possibly, there's more room at the top than we'd imagine there has been.
What do you think?
Well, look, it's going to be hard to dethrone BMW and Mercedes as things are today, but we've just spent a lot of time talking about autonomy. Ride-sharing services are going to be part of that. In fact, mobility services are going to be part of that. When it comes to that, just about everybody starts from scratch, from zero.
Right.
And there's an opportunity for these other brands, should they so choose to go that route, to be serious players of high-end, i.e. a luxurious mobility service. Mercedes and BMW are going to be in there too. But again, like I said, because this is all brand new, everyone starts from scratch. It's the quintessential paradigm shift.
Right.
Now, this will not probably play out for another decade yet. But in automotive terms, a decade is what? 2 design cycles. Bang, you're there.
Right.
So it can happen very quick from that standpoint.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a different type of branding. I mean, what fascinates me about sort of the current luxury market is that, Acura is they make very good cars, and they're rebranding themselves, which is smart as a performance brand. That's what Honda and Acura have always meant to us. Is they're an engine company, they're a performance brand, they have passion. But at the same time, as I was driving that TLX, wonderful
Can't talk
sedan.
about driving impressions yet.
Yes. Same time I'm driving that vehicle, I'm driving a BMW X4. And even before you get to autonomous, here's BMW, which has cut its teeth on sedans, brilliant handling, M sedans, and now I'm driving a 5-door M car, X4M, which really doesn't look much different than any other 5-door out there. They're trying to make it look different with the coupe, but I wonder if that makes it easier for the Acuras to compete against the BMWs, because now everybody wants to drive a 5-door.
Yeah, but don't ever underestimate, especially in the luxury segment, the power of a brand.
Yeah.
And what people are buying primarily is that BMW Roundel.
Yeah.
Now pick your body shape that you want, but I'm going after that BMW because now everyone will know that I'm cool, I'm hip, and I'm upscale.
Although to be fair, if we to bring this sort of back to, we were talking earlier about the subject, that if you look at how BMW has fared in terms of its electric vehicles and its hybrid, not doing so well.
Nope.
So people who are voting, like the Chevy Bolt, is doing much better than the i3 is doing, and you can look at the i8's numbers. $143,000 answer to a question nobody asked. It's just not doing well at all. And you look at, and that's just a hybrid, right? And you look at, Tesla sales compared to that, it's crazy. So it's not necessarily, so maybe when we get to autonomy, everybody will want that Pacifica.
Could well be, but I think it's going to be more the service, not just the vehicle. Does the service come, does the vehicle come, which I call on my app, and it's perfectly clean, because I'm paying a little bit extra so that when the last person used the Pacifica, the first thing it does is go back to the dealership where they detail it, and now I get a perfectly clean vehicle. So that's just one example of what I'm talking about, of who's going to provide the best service. And I'm intrigued by what Lincoln is doing and Genesis is doing, where you essentially don't have to go to the dealership at all.
Right.
In the entire time that you have the vehicle, you do not have to go to the dealership. And now Lincoln providing this chauffeur service as part of your lease. So if you think, hey, I've had a few drinks too many at the restaurant, I'm going to call a chauffeur on my app. Or, geez, I need somebody to go pick up my dry cleaning, and I'm busy at work. I'm going to call the chauffeur, and they use my car to go do it. I'm intrigued, and Genesis aspiring for that same kind of service level. I think that's how you fight Mercedes and BMW, because trying to do it product-wise is, as I keep saying, that's like doing a frontal assault on the machine guns.
Right.
don't do that. Pull an end run on them, and that's what I think Lincoln and
It's also
Genesis
less
are
expensive,
doing.
much less expensive than having to engineer a platform to compete against those guys.
Right.
Yeah, it's
So forget the Nürburgring and just
That's
take,
right. Yeah.
take lessons in service.
But can you build a brand on service? Or I mean, the brands we're talking about at the top of the heap right now, BMW,
Well,
Mercedes, are passion brands.
right.
Can you build passion on service?
Well, it's got to be, they got to go together, I think. When I pull up to the country club or the fancy restaurant as a luxury car owner, I want to show up in something that people go, wow, look at that. Even though it's fully autonomous and I'm paying a monthly service fee to get this kind of service. So I think it's got to be both. Design, I don't think, is ever going to go away. People want to be seen in stuff that they like themselves and which they perceive other people will think is cool because they're in it. And they're going to be cool because they're in it. So I don't think design's going to go away, but I think you have to have both. You got to have luxury, you got to have design. But I think the thing that's now going to be the next differentiator is service.
Right. There was good news out of Chrysler this week that they're making money, and one big piece of that is Maserati, which is selling cars, SUVs, hand over fist. My hobby horse the last couple of months has been writing about the potential of a Corvette SUV. Why shouldn't every performance brand out there be building an SUV right now? I mean, here's Maserati. Maserati, bang, their sales were up 75% in the first quarter because they introduced an SUV into the market. Shouldn't GM be leveraging Corvette as a Corvette SUV?
I say no.
Here's my question: what's the purpose of a performance brand?
To make money.
To make money. Exactly right. So if I'm GM and I've got this beautiful brand called Corvette, I'm locking up value of that brand by not producing an SUV.
So why don't you basically take your Cadillac brand that exists, your Cadillac products that have established names like the XT5 and the Escalade, and you make them into performance beasts? Why don't you take your Suburban and Tahoe and make, balls to the walls SS versions of those vehicles? That way, you already have the established nameplates, you already have the channels that exist, therefore it's cheaper and you can make more money.
I would say my retort to that would be, this is why the Volkswagen Group has both Audi and Porsche. And it also explains why Porsche went from a little car company that made 40 to 50,000 cars a year, sold them globally, 40 to 50,000. And this is only within the last 20 years. Coming out with an SUV that everybody laughed at and is now a 200,000 car a year company. And again, it comes back to what's the purpose of it? To make money.
And the numbers on Dr. Dave would love this. The numbers on the Porsche Group, 2.3% of VW Group sales, and they're responsible for 30% of VW Group profit.
They make the most money, and
30% of VW Group profit.
And it's funny if you look at, and so these are March numbers, so they're. So if you look at, so for the month of, well, it's calendar year to date, Porsche car, 3,741, Porsche light truck, 8,977. So it's more than double.
Right.
They're and that's the Cayenne and the Macan, that those two make up for the 911, Carrera, Turbo, 918 Spider, Carrera GT, Boxster, Cayman, Panamera.
Yeah.
Okay, so all those things are less than half the number of just two
That's right.
SUVs.
And so, it comes back to the brand question, because you're right, Gary. I mean, why can't Cadillac just do this? Well, they're trying, and it's working a little bit, but man, the power of the Corvette brand.
It's working a little bit in China, maybe. I don't think it's doing so well here.
Yeah, it's. Well, look, they're making good money. They're solidly profitable. They account for 10% of GM's net profit. But Yeah, they're locking up a lot of value in that company by keeping Corvette as one model.
Henry,
Right.
don't you want that mid-engine Corvette first?
I do, but I'm wondering, you know, I mean, these companies are inscrutable, and they should be. But I wonder if the mid-engine Corvette, which is going to be a second model line for them, it doesn't open up the potential for this. And the wonderful thing about SUVs, and you see this with Porsche, is it opens up so much bigger demographic for that brand.
Especially women.
That's
Porsche
right.
never attracted female,
Yeah.
or I shouldn't say never, but very, very few.
Yeah.
Now I'll bet they're more than half.
Right, and the magic of that, when you open it to a demographic beyond motorheads like me, is you can start to sell $30,000 units a year, and you can plow that back into race programs and mid-engine and everything that made Porsche or Corvette the great brand that it was to begin with. I mean, it's a win-win situation.
Does the string run out on this, though?
On,
SUVs, performance SUVs, luxury SUVs?
well,
Does it get to the point where basically you saturate it and people are just like,
yeah, no, that's a good question. I mean, it's a question of any
I
market.
mean, when Rolls-Royce comes out with theirs, I mean, isn't it like at that point, you know, jump the shark? I mean, it's over.
I think you got a great point, Gary. I think we're at a real close to jump the shark on performance SUVs.
Right.
I
mean, just for run-of-the-mill, I mean, it's just like...
No, I think the overall SUV, let's call it crossover SUV, because that's what it really is, will continue to grow.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't see any
People will
slowdown
buy
in sight.
Equinoxes, they won't buy Malibus, they'll buy Escapes, and they won't buy Fusions and RAV4 rather than Camry. But, you know, when you get these upper-end things, it's like...
Someday, but for now, everybody's doing it, and they're making money off of it, making big money off of it.
Hey, we're going to have to wrap up, guys. This is really good. We could go on longer, but we're going to have to wrap it up.
Until next week.
Henry, thanks so much for stopping by again.
Yeah,
Always
thanks,
good to have
John.
you here.
Thanks, guys.
And your artistic skills as well as your automotive skills.
Yeah, I have to go take some bust making lessons from our friend Don there.
There you go. Learn how to sculpt.
Yeah.
Okay.
Gary, good seeing you.
Okay, John.
We'll do it again next week.
All right.
Want to thank everybody for having tuned in.
Autoline After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, your journey, our passion, and by Lear, a global leader in automotive seating and electrical systems.
Visit our website, Autoline.tv, where you can watch us live Thursday afternoons. Get your daily fix with Autoline Daily and in-depth analysis and interviews with Autoline This Week. There's all that and much more at Autoline.tv.